Hey there, Beverly Hills 90210 fans. It's now time to dive deep into an episode-by-episode, character-by-character, song-by-song account of the making of your favorite zip code. With your host, Charles Rosen.
I sit in a chair. It's one of Sandy's antiques. The whole thing breaks.
Larry Mullen.
He shouldn't be even in this show. I hope they're going to kill him, and they did.
Pete Ferrero.
Up my TV crush is Claire Arnold. So, I mean, she has to come on the show at this point.
And representing the fans, Lilly Amarim.
Brian, I love you. I have dreamt about you.
What?
Along with many special guests. And your questions. So sit back and relax because it's like totally time for the Beverly Hills 90210 show.
Okay, a brand new intro there, right? Kicking it up a little bit.
Very nice, guys.
Yeah.
Sure, bring up the time I ruined Candy's chair. Okay.
I love that story.
Fine, you know.
We can revisit that. We've got
that story. I knew the story, but I until you just mentioned, I forgot when you did that.
We got a great group here today. I'm super excited to have everybody here. Let's catch up. Charles Rosen, how is everything going on your end? I think there's a new family member in your life. Yes.
Oh yeah. I'm I get to spend time with our first grandchild, little Helen B. She's very cute. She's already running the show.
Nice.
Which is very tough on my daughter, but no, it's been a good time, and we're having a fourth without the beach and the fireworks, but we're all together, so it should be good.
Yes, very cool.
And baseball's only 25 to 30 days away. So
I know, I can't wait. I know we're opposite teams, but that's okay. Yeah, Mets.
Just the concept that somebody would be doing something other than talking on Zoom, right?
Yes.
Right, Tony?
Yes. Lilly, how's everything going in the fans? A very active week, I see, right? Lots going on there. Lilly?
It's good. It's going great. We're so excited to be here tonight with Tony and Chuck and trying to get Jessica on, but I don't think she's received my message yet.
Okay, Jessica may join us. We'll see. And then, of course, the man who did so much with casting, a legend in the industry, Tony Sheperd. Thank you for joining us. I know we're super excited to hear about all this kind of stuff. How are you doing, man? How's quarantine for you? You're with Disney now. Has that been an adjustment for you with everything that's going on?
Yeah, it's been So my day job is I lead artist relations for the Disney destinations globally. Which is a fancy way of saying when your favorite TV, film, singers, all those folks want to visit a Disney park anywhere in the world, I take care of their visits. So I make sure they have as great a time as a everyday guest does. So I sell the celebrity strategy for all of our vacation destinations. So obviously we've been completely shut down globally up until about 30 days ago, and everything's kind of coming back online. I'm based in Orlando, although I travel the world. And we're slowly getting things back open. Walt Disney World opens a week from Saturday. So there we go.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it's interesting, though. Interesting times, and certainly for Disney, I'm sure must be something that you've never had to experience ever.
Yeah, I mean, have any of us? I mean,
right.
Although I have to say, if I ever hear the expression, the new normal, and let's see where we are in 2 weeks again.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I think about, especially, I mean, Florida. It all is relative. But here we got Florida, Texas, California, and Arizona, and we're all vying for which state's going to spiral out of control first.
Yeah.
At this point, a little bit.
Yeah. It's very challenging, and anyway, it's a whole other topic. We're here to talk about
90210 and all this great stuff. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Listen, guys, I'm going to do something fun today. I'm going to give away a free T-shirt from the Beverly Hills 90210 store.
Yay.
Look at this. Okay, the Beverly Hills 90210 show shop. We got Dylan's little car there. That's a nice little. And we got Brandon's thing over here too. So here's how you're going to do it. We need some iTunes, Apple podcast reviews. So head over, do a Apple Podcast 5-star review, and then email me. Let me see what my email. I'll pop that up here for you guys. Peter at BeverlyHills90210show.com. Show me that you did that, and someone is going to get a free shirt by the end. Lily, remind me that someone's getting a free shirt by the end. All right, so let me ask you, Tony, how did you get into this?
Hey, Pete, Jessica's hanging out backstage.
Yeah, I don't see her though. I saw that she said that. I don't see her. I don't see her hanging out. Yeah.
She says she's been here forever.
But I don't see. I tell her to leave and come back in. Try it again. Like leave, exit the room, like leave studio and
come back.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, Tony. So tell me about how you got into the world of Aaron Spelling and more specifically 90210.
I came to Aaron from ABC. I was head of current series casting at ABC from 1981. No, I'm lying. 1979 to 1981. This just shows you that I am indeed 100 years old. And then was with Aaron from 1981 to 1995. So I actually did leave the company before 90210 was done, but I was there for most of the years and some of the beginning.
When it was called Aaron's Broadcasting Company.
Yeah. So it's interesting. When I first went to work for Aaron, and I came from ABC, which was, and I don't want to get hung up on this because I know everybody wants to hear about 90210, we really don't talk about, but there was an agreement basically between Aaron and ABC that he would not poach executives from the network, because at the time when I joined Aaron, he could only do television for ABC. That his contract, he was exclusive. So still to this day, I'm not quite sure how they pulled that off, but he called and I went, and it was great. But I worked on, 90210 obviously is a happy, vivid memory of my time there. But I worked on the casting of shows like obviously 90210, Melrose Place. I did 11 years of The Love Boat. I did 9-10 years of Hotel. I worked on every single episode of Dynasty from the first to the last. Shows like Mac Houston. The list goes on and on and on. It was, by the time I left, I either overseen the casting or personally cast almost 1,700 hours of television and film. I cast Lucia Ball's last series, which we could do 3 hours on. That was pretty extraordinary. And then, somewhere along the way, 90210 came up. It was
so. Let me put one thing in context for the fans. In the network era at Fox, the 3 networks, CBS, NBC, ABC, Fox being a broadcast startup, every show that Tony mentioned was gone. Most of the people who made those shows, gone. Any other commitments, any other networks, none. Only one pilot, only one show in the hamper from this once great company, and it's called The Class of Beverly Hills.
Chuck's right, and so I can put another context. It's like, okay, your
every show that Tony
Jessica. We've got Jessica Klein.
Hi
guys. Hey Tony.
Hey Jess, good to see you. If you imagine that you're Mickey Mantle, Barry Bonds, and Willie Mays all rolled into one, you are the most powerful producer in television. At one particular point, we had 7 series on the air. 7. I mean, no one does that today. I mean, that hasn't been done in years. We had 7 series on the air. We were so busy, I couldn't read all the scripts. I mean, just for the current series that were going on,
right?
7 series times 22 episodes and trying to manage all of that, right? But then, as Chuck said, it all vanished. It all stopped. And as I'm sure you've talked about a ton on other episodes, Barry Diller called Aaron. Barry was running the startup Fox network, and said, we want to do this show about today's kids in high school, and we think Aaron's the guy to do it. And Aaron and Barry were good friends. And Aaron, and he said this publicly, this is not a secret, he said, why did they pick me to do this? At that time he was 100. I'm being slightly facetious, but And, thank God he found Darren Star, who had a voice and kind of got it. And obviously it won from there. So, from terms of place setting and all of that, that's a bit of background. I can tell you this, to me and the people that I work with on the pilot at the time, it was another pilot. It was just there's a lot of focus on it that year because, as Chuck said, it was the company's only pilot.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, it was just like, okay, next project, right?
Well, also, it was kind of, even though casting in this wing was Spelling's domain, it was a bastard pilot because, given what Tony just said, that Aaron was, and said facetiously, Aaron was 100 years old, and Fox was trying to pass themselves off as, the hip network. Yeah. They needed to find hipness. So CAA represented a very hip company of music videos called Propaganda. Did all of Madonna's videos with all these great directors like David Fincher and Leslie Linklater and a whole bunch of really, stars that came out of it. Mike Abbey did them for them. So it was the merging of the two. So it even was, creatively, I think a lot of push and pull, and it was, and then came the process that they, now had to make it. And the first step, of course, is casting.
Right.
And had you ever worked with Joanna Ray before?
Yeah, Joanna was my idea. I mean, when we would do shows, I couldn't cast everything personally. Right. That would be, again, to put it in context of what, so that people watching can understand. If I were to have cast everything we did personally, that'd be the equivalent of one cook, right? Every single meal, right, on a cruise ship. It's just, there's too many plates in the air. You can't do it. So you have to have, you have to have a lot of people. So what I would do is I would hire a casting director, and I would oversee it and work hand in hand with them. If memory serves, and you'll hear me say this throughout the time we're together, I'm old, so I forget stuff, but I don't think Joanna was the first choice. I want to say I think I called Jane Jenkins and Janet Hershenson, who are legendary feature casting people, who had done a lot of work on, a lot of teen movies, and they weren't available. And the guys at Propaganda loved Joanna and were very supportive. So that's how she ended up doing the project. And we were friends. It was great.
Yeah.
Here, some of the things that I remember from the pilot, there's a handful of stories that I remember. Jason was tied to another series. He had done a pilot for, I pretty much bet the house on the fact that it was NBC. He'd done a pilot for them. It didn't sell. It was in the previous cycle. Mm-hmm. And for your viewers, this could be very different today. When you make a pilot, you would have two selling seasons. Basically, you'd have spring or fall. So if it didn't sell in the fall, they would have a second bite at the apple. So they basically held you for a year. So Jason had made a pilot for NBC. I don't remember the name of it. It didn't sell. Technically, he was tied to that project. But Chuck mentioned CAA. CAA represented Aaron. Mm-hmm. And in those days, CAA had tremendous influence over network schedules and worked very closely with the networks. And they would always know pretty much what was going to sell and what was going to happen before,
Absolutely. They had this great strategy where they would do this to people and it would work out really great.
We brought Jason in to read. When we went to the network, it was just Jason. I don't think we took anybody else. And we did that based on the fact that, we had great intel through CAA that show was not going to sell. Had that, whatever that show was, whatever it was, if it was at all good, I'm telling you, NBC really could have screwed Fox and could have screwed us by just picking it up. Had they wanted to have been, bad about it. They could have just picked up Jason and paid him for 6 episodes or whatever his contract was.
Right.
It would have. So it was dangerous.
It was in one sense, Tony, but Fox was it just, they were a glorified syndication company. I mean, I'm sure NBC people didn't think about Fox. When we get into it a little beyond the pilot, I mean, I was always amazed that why the actors that would get sent to us in the first 12 almost had no credits. It's hard to get people to come to Fox, especially for our little show. So when we got good people, when they did walk in, it was really, will you stay forever kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you get this show, you get the 90210 show. So are you you got a list of who's going to be in the pilot? You got all the characters and whatnot.
Okay. We got a script.
Yeah. So now, you're saying Jason was the only one that you kind of knew we could do something.
Yeah.
With.
I mean, we read. You know what? There was one other guy. And now I'm remembering. I can't think of his name. I can't remember. There's one other guy.
Did he wind up in the cast, or
one other guy we took to the network actually.
For the role of Brandon.
What?
For the role of Brandon?
There was one other guy. Cannot remember his name.
Mm-hmm.
I can see his face.
Okay,
but it was one of those things where, and this was a trick that used to happen all the time. And by the way, for those people out there who are future television producers and directors, this is a dangerous thing to do. What you do is you bring somebody to the network who, you, the production company, in your mind, you're saying to yourself, they're never going to get this to make your first choice look so much better. And I'm telling you, there have been pilots that have been destroyed because the network has insisted on going with the other guy in the pilot crash. So, it's one thing I would.
Been there, done that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would always gently remind, I would gently remind Aaron in the post ABC days, right? When he was just on ABC and it was Aaron's broadcasting company, he cast whatever he wanted to. It was Aaron went in with his choice. He would let the network people talk, and then he would say, "We're going with X," and that was that. Fox, new network, new ball game. You don't have any shows on the air. We're the new kids in town.
Right.
But when we went to the network with Jason, whoever this other guy was, slam dunk, we knew it was going to be him.
So that's interesting, I think, for fans, right? That Jason was the first sort of the first one, the one that we were going to sort of center around at that point. Yeah. What about the sister, Brenda? Was somebody asked here a question? Someone asked a question here. Wasn't Jason's real life twin considered for Brenda, or is that true?
Yeah, Lori, she was, and as I recall, the reading was just
right. Sorry.
Let's come back. Let's come
to Brenda.
Back. Okay. Yeah, because that's probably a longer conversation.
Okay.
Jenny Garth, and casting people. We're the first to always admit when we miss something. Jenny is, and to this day, is managed by one of my very favorite people, a guy called Randy James. And Jenny had gone into Reed for Joanna. And a day or so afterwards, Randy had called Joanna and said, how did Jenny do? And Joanna said, yeah, she's okay. And so, and the question was, are you going to bring her onto the producers? And Joanna said, I don't think so. And Randy called me and asked if I would read her. So she came in and read for me. And this is another one of those where, honestly, I don't remember this, but other people have told me is what happened. Jenny read. It was just the two of us. I read with her. I asked her to step outside. I picked up the phone. I called upstairs and I said, what's he doing? And I brought Jenny upstairs and she read one-on-one with me for Aaron. And then she went to the network and she got it.
Wow.
And Jenny has been lovely and kind enough over the years to tell that story publicly, and has always been enormously grateful. And she's one of my favorite people. I adore her.
Now, okay, let me ask you a question about Tori. There's always been this rumor, and then
I will tell you the story. I was there.
You know, that she didn't, no one knew who she was. We've heard this as a kid, that no one knew who she was. They didn't know that this was Aaron's daughter. And then she came in and she wowed everybody and she got the part. Is that how you recall it, or is it a little bit different?
It's only a tiny bit different.
Okay.
So in the pilot, there was a very small role. It was very tiny. It was about 4 lines. And I want to say it was Jenny's best friend or Shannon's best friend. I don't remember which character's best friend it was.
Mm-hmm.
And Aaron called me and said he wanted Tori to read for it, but he wanted Tori to get it on her own merits. And look, I have a love-hate relationship with Aaron Spelling that is
deeper than most people's.
We had a very complicated relationship. But I am one who always believes in credit where credit's due. And this is what we did. He called me and he said he wants her to read for it. And what I did was, I remember, I sat down at a typewriter, I typed out her resume, and on the resume she'd done jobs,
mm-hmm.
but we changed her name. On the resume was Victoria Martin. Never forget the name. Victoria Martin. That's where Donna Martin came from.
Interesting. Yeah.
And so she went in, she read for Tim Hunter, who directed the pilot. Nobody else, she didn't have to go to the network because it wasn't a series regular.
Right.
It was a few more pilot. So she read for Tim. We brought in a couple of other people, and Tim went, I like her, let's use her. So she got the job in the pilot on her own merits. No other way. How she became a series regular?
A little bit different.
Different story. But she got the job on her own. So
that's actually a Charles story for another time.
Okay, let's save that though. Yeah.
Nothing particularly unique about Ian. Ian was just one of the guys who came in red with a few others. As I remember, the character of Steve was not that prominent in the pilot. I mean, it was really
right.
And Brandon. So he went in red, whatever, great. Brian Austin Green was a minor. He was not an adult. And by the way, I can tell this because I can selfishly plug my own business right now. But when we opened Star Wars Galaxy's Edge here at Walt Disney World, Brian came for the opening.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I know he's a big fan of all that stuff. Yeah.
He's a huge Star Wars fan.
Mm-hmm.
And we hadn't seen each other in a while, so I got to hang out with him and his kids, and the mother of his kids. I guess that's the correct thing to say. It was great. It was a really, really, really nice reunion. It was great. And I remember there were a couple of other people, couldn't tell you who the actors were, but there were a couple of folks who read for it and who were of age, and they liked Brian so much that they hired him. And I say that again for the people who are watching. There's all sorts of labor law restrictions when you're under 18.
Mm-hmm.
You can work less hours, and you got to have a certain number of hours of school, and there's all these restrictions. And by the way, working with a lot of Disney Channel kids right now, it's my life. I know what that's about. They were willing to sacrifice that because they liked him so much.
Right.
And last, in terms of regulars that I can think of, was Gabby.
Yeah. Well, before you get to Gabby, what about David's sidekick?
So he was such a good kid, and he was so nice, and he did a nice job. And Chuck, do you remember? I think it was budgetary, the reason they cut him going to series. I don't remember. I think it was budgetary.
It was always budgetary, Tony. Do you remember that we squeezed Ian and he had to do a 7 out of 13 for the first run, which if anybody thought this was going after, 7 out of 12, nobody thought it was going, there, really. So, it just was one of these endeavors that happy to be working, but, there was a lot of confusion. We talked about, Darren hasn't talked publicly about it a lot, but a lot of confusion, a lot of pulling and pushing and pulling and things along those lines. So the fact that it and even just before, but just one thing about the pilot, and then going back to, of course, to Brenda, and then we'll move forward. But before I was coming on, I always put on YouTube and blast a song before, starting from the era. And it was that song that they used, Jessica, at the end of the pilot, they used the song Rome by the B-52s.
Love that song. Yeah.
And the song, in fact, there was a full 2 weeks whether are we going to make this our opening credits or not. And it would be a good song. We couldn't afford it, so it was a little moot. But the fact of the matter is that you're listening to that and you realize no matter what you might have thought about the pilot in its roughest stage, Tony, in that 2 hour, the 90-minute that originally was a little hanky before some things got tightened up. And you got to that song at the end, and you did the typical Aaron spelling. Here are the highlights to the song and the credits. And you went, oh yeah, I like her. Oh yeah, I like that scene. Oh yeah, this. Right. And but it was good. But the funny thing is, well, talk about Brenda, and then I want to ask you one thing about casting in the pilot.
Yeah.
Well, first before Brenda, we have
Gabby.
Yeah,
So here's the thing, and I'm not sure how we found out about this, but Gabby was 32, I think, when the first season of 90210. I mean, Gabby was, and she was still playing high school kids. I mean, it was pretty extraordinary. And the one thing I remember, by the way,
I think she was 30. She was 30,
maybe, yeah.
She was 29.
29. Lily, thank you.
29.
And by the way, obviously, she's now president of the Screen Actors Guild and has done great work. Disney owns Nat Geo. She's done some stuff for Nat Geo. I saw Gabby at the last D23 convention. She's fantastic.
Yes,
is great. And she talked to me about her audition. Then again, she remembered it vividly and said that it was, it thanked me and oh my God, this is so amazing and thanks for the help. And I remember none of it. I remember none of it. But what the point I was going to make was Erin was like, everybody swore into secrecy. Nobody dares say how old she is. And I do remember when we were at the network, somebody said, how old is she in the room? And there was this kind of dead silence among everybody spelling who was there. And I think Erin chomped on his pipe and said, I don't know. And the subject was changed. I don't think it's a series sold, and the series was picked up that anybody found out. As far as Brenda's concerned, since Chuck asked me to come on, I thought a lot about this, and I believe that, to be honest, is the best policy.
Yes.
Shannon is not the person today that she was then, but I will tell you the following about Shannon. First of all, she'd been out of work for a while before she had done the pilot of 90210. Heather's had been a few years before, and she hadn't worked a lot since. Joanna Ray, and I've never said this publicly, Joanna Ray got a phone call from a producer. I do not know who it is or who it was. And the producer said to her, quote, whatever you do, do not hire that girl. You will be sorry, end quote. And so Joanna called me and I went, what, is she an axe murderer? I mean, come on.
What could be wrong with this person? Right.
It's going to be fine. The other thing is that Shannon slept on my couch during the shooting of the pilot. She had nowhere else to go.
Wow. So
we were very good friends. And she was incredibly talented. There was not one doubt in the room when she went in and auditioned. Jess, somebody said you look really lovely today. I just happened to glance over to the comment.
She always does, yes.
Very nice.
Adriana said this. Jessica Klein looks so lovely today. Yes, she does.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, she does. By the way, welcome to the show, Jessica.
Gossiping along.
How's everything been with you? Are you doing well? You're the most
About Shannon, not me.
Okay, I just want to let you know. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Should I show this picture, Chuck? I think you may have put it up, but I can
somewhere.
Yeah. I can show this picture.
Oh no, they put it up. You got the one.
There you go.
You Alice in Wonderland. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was our.
So that picture was taken, ironically, at Disneyland on Main Street the day before the pilot started shooting. We drove down there, and we went and we went to Disneyland together the day before. The only other thing I'll share at this point is I will say that there were times when she was a dream to work with. There were times she was an absolute nightmare. Chuck got the brunt of it. And I will tell you that I can count on both hands and both feet the number of times I got calls and had to either call her or drive out to the set and pull her aside and talk to her. That was not something that was a big part of my life in those days. Most of the actors that we worked with were pretty normal and pretty easy to deal with. She was a handful. And I can tell you that the last time working at the company that I saw Shannon, I was at the Spelling House, the Manor, and I was at the house with Aaron, and Tori was home, and Shannon and Tori were in the house, and I'm standing in a hallway, and Shannon walked right by me, looked at me, and never said a word. Didn't even acknowledge it. I mean, it's not like there were 100 people. There was me in a hallway with her. She walked right by and never acknowledged her. And that's the last time I saw her face to face. So,
here's that picture that you guys were talking about. That's you and Shannon.
I was so young.
You know, there was one other person in the pilot, though, that I got to talk about because, what was her name? Leslie Vega or Biega, the one who played the rich girl.
Marianne Moore.
What?
She played Marianne Moore.
Marianne Moore, the actress.
Yeah.
I look at the pilot and I'm thinking that Jessica, this was even before you and Steve joined. I'm looking at the pilot thinking about all the episodes I'm going to write about her because she was the rich girl in the big house, and she was Tony and I grew up not that far from each other, and we knew girls like that in houses and situations like that. So I'm thinking, this is a real one, but there was no love lost there, and she wasn't even in the mix.
No.
I thought that she was definitely going to be, watching the pilot as a kid. I thought she would have been in the mix moving forward with the show because she'd gotten so much, play in that episode for sure. Yeah.
Did you see that, everybody? See what Tony did? This is a very important little, code in Los Angeles here.
Well,
the heart, the epicenter of greed.
So what's changed dramatically in TV these days is that these days programming that's made by whether it's cable, whether it's networks, or whether it's streaming, the companies that actually distribute the shows also have ownership of them. Back in these days, the shows were owned by the production companies and our studios who made them. And what there is that the network would give you $50 to make a show, but the show would cost $125. And it was your responsibility as the production company to go out and find the other $75. Thankfully, we had a distribution company, and Aaron with deficit finance, because in those days, all the profits from syndication and all that stuff were owned by the production company and our studio. The network didn't get any of it. All different now. So the reality of it is Fox, being the tiny little brand new startup, they didn't have the money. As a matter of fact, they weren't paying the license fees that the network. They were a network, but the license fees that.
Oh no, Tony, you're absolutely right. And like the podcast, the people listen know this. We had the lowest license fee in network television for the first 2 years. After that, we got a reprieve, and I stopped worrying about that. The first 2 years, I mean, it was we would start every episode behind in the pattern budget, practically. It was no way, so that was, we just dealt with it, and we figured out ways to have, very long scenes between two people looking at each other's eyes, and it was romantic, but we had no choice. No cars blew
Kissing
up
is
in the
free.
So
Jimmy? Yeah, kissing is free, exactly.
so we should probably chat about our dear sweet friend Luke Perry a little bit.
Before we do that, I want to just pop this comment. Somebody popped it, Melinda Berg. Shannon was a handful, but she was super talented. I think we all appreciate her work and her fight that she's going through. So obviously we're all here. We're talking about something from 30 years ago, right, Tony?
Yes, absolutely. And I really hope I made that clear, is that she's a different woman today. I mean, she really is. And remember, as bad as it was at the end, she came back to work for Aaron. Don't forget that. Right. She was in charge,
Yeah.
So it's
fool me once. No.
Right, you're right, because I wasn't going to say, but it's I don't care how what the circumstances are. If you're that awful, right, off camera, if you're not unbelievably good on camera, right? Episode 1, season 3, Brenda gets a facelift. Brenda gets her face done. Brenda gets plastic surgery, and Jane Doe is the new Brenda Walsh.
Right. So, yeah. So she's a phenomenal talent, and we obviously all the fans that watch our podcast and watch the show love her. So I mean, it's important that we make that clear. Before we hop to Luke, Jim and Cindy, I wanted to ask you about them. Well, they're in the pilot, yeah, right? Yeah.
When you're the 7th and 8th,
James Eckhouse wasn't.
That's right.
That's right.
So Eckhouse is the one that you and I did together. Carol was in it; she was good. But James, I don't know if you did. I know Tony doesn't remember this. James, sometimes you go in auditions. And I didn't know very much about auditions. In fact, prior to us casting, Tony, you and I casting, working together to cast Luke and Jim Eckhouse, I had only been in any casting session for 3 days on a Beach Boy movie I wrote. Len Hill was the producer, and the only reason that he liked writers to go to casting is he told me, he said, you get free rewrites. You're here, you're part of the process. And I didn't know what to say to actors. Len would say, nice adjustment. So I used that for the whole first season. I didn't really go through it. But I did know that when James Eckhouse walked in the room, I had seen him on 30-something. I knew he was a good actor, and I could tell on his face it was hot afternoon. It was summer. There was a lot of traffic, and he didn't want to be in this little show. And his first reading wasn't very good. It didn't matter. We brought him back for number 2, and there that was. So at least I knew that by human nature. Because when you look at him in profile, he looked like my father. So, he had that leg up.
And I remember when it came to the parents, right? Aaron was like grapevine. I mean, he wasn't that, he knew the kids were the focus. He wasn't really, I assume you've told the Luke story.
No, I don't think we haven't had that on here. No. Before we jump into that, before we came on, Charles said, that Jessica was great because she loved actors, and you loved all of these, all the actors, right? So what did your?
I was taught very early on that actors are props, but I got along with the actors. I got along with Shannon. But we didn't go to the studio that much. The truth is, we were too busy writing, and I had worked in soap operas before, in another life, before I moved into primetime. And in soaps, you're taught early on, never talk to an actor, because all they want is for their storyline to be increased. And so we learned to be scared. If you ever caught alone with one of them, and we were friendly and supportive, but Paul Wagner's job was to handle them when they were unhappy. Every now and then, I was asked to talk to one of the girls. After Jenny had been on drugs forever, the character after Kelly was on drugs, and she'd gone through one more terrible cirrus after another. she begged me, please make my character happy again so I can wear a pretty dress. And it was like, that was the extent of the type of talk we'd have.
Right.
Other than friendly and let's have a party and why don't you come? That kind of.
That's cool stuff. Yeah. That's the kind of conversations you want to have. All right. So probably someone that was wonderful and beautiful you were just going to start talking about is Luke Perry. You were just going to start telling that story, I think.
Somebody I see off to the right mentioned that Dylan was not slated to be a permanent character. Originally, was only supposed to be in a couple of episodes. He was starting this a couple of episodes because they wanted to see what the chemistry was going to be with the girls in the show. I will never forget this day at Fox as long as I'm on this earth. This was it season 2? Season 1? When was it?
Season 1.
Season 1, yeah.
Season 1, episode 1.
Right. So between the pilot and the series, that's right. Between the pilot finishing and the series being picked up, they were making changes, and these people left, and these people are going to stay, and we need to find this guy. And in those days, and I imagine it's no different now, these are the hardest people in the world to find. A guy with edge, a guy with a look, somebody who's going to have chemistry with your female lead, and somebody who can actually act. And we did something that you never ever do. You never do this. We brought one actor to the network, and it was him. We only brought him to the network to read. That's never a smart thing to do, because a guy that I obviously worship said it better than anybody. Walt Disney said it's very hard to make a choice. It's very hard to make a decision from a choice of one. And that applies very much in casting. But Aaron felt so strongly about Luke that he only took Luke to the network. And so we went. Chuck, I can see that room. It was tiered. I can see that room at Fox like it was
down in the basement. Yeah,
I will never forget it. And Luke went in and he read, and it was god awful. It was a terrible reading. And Aaron leaned over to me, and he whispered in my ear. He said, "Take him outside and go talk to him." And I walked outside, and listen, I've been working with actors for going on 40 plus years now. And this is what I said to him. I walked up to him, I grabbed him by the shoulders, I looked at him straight in the eye, and I said, "Luke, calm the F down," and turned around and walked back in the room. That's all I could think to say. Just calm down. He was like all over the place. And he came back in, and he read again, and to his credit, he calmed down and he read better. Luke left, and Chuck, maybe you remember, I don't know, was it Peter Chernin? I can't remember who it was at the time in the room. Maybe it was Barry. I don't remember. But they turned to Aaron and said, "Aaron, you know what?"
Diller. It wasn't Diller. Diller wasn't involved at all. It was Chernin.
Yeah, it was Peter who ran the network. He's part of the network. Peter said, "Aaron, I'm just going to be honest with you. We don't see it. He's a good-looking guy. We don't see it." And Aaron stood up and looked at him. And Aaron's never said this before or since. He said, "You know what, guys? I feel so strongly about this that I'm going to cast him, and you guys don't have to pay for him." In other words, there's a thing in network budgets there was called breakage. So normally, adding this character, they would have gotten X number of dollars more in the license fee to pay for this character. Aaron said he would pay for it. It wouldn't be charged to the network. And my friends, from that day forward until the final day of Beverly Hills 90210, the total amount of money that Fox paid for Luke Perry was zero.
Wow.
Spelling paid for it from day one till the last day. Wow. He was the loveliest, kindest, gentlest, sweetest guy. He was, if you've seen him in interviews or talking, what you saw was what you get. He was as kind and lovely to a stranger as he was to people who loved him. I caught up with him a year or so before he passed. I was out in LA, and we were together, and it was like we'd never been apart. He was an amazing guy, and I loved him dearly, and we all did. And somebody said, do we think that the show would have been the same if it weren't for him? I don't know that it would have been the hit that it was without him.
Not at all.
Definitely
no
not.
way. And that is why, glad it circles back to something I wanted to say. I think you might feel the same way, Jessica. You know, Aaron looked at what we had and what we were doing, and the stress that we were having working with this new network that really didn't made it so difficult to develop material, and looked and said around, if I don't make a, like do my Hail Mary pass now and go for the touchdown, we got nothing here. And that's not a belittle to our cast or anybody else involved, but you put that picture up of Luke and you see that he was at that modern edge that you talked about. And one thing I know in the lore of Aaron Spelling that I do believe to be true, and this certainly is the start of Tony, that this is something he did really well, was casting. Mm-hmm. He knew what he wanted, and he knew that sense. He used to talk about, I remember seeing him once on the Tom Snyder show, talking about he could tell who he wanted the moment they walked in the room. And I remember being home at 1:15 at night, and years before I met him, thinking, oh, that's just, how can a guy be like that? I don't wonder these big guys. No, you can tell the moment when you're in that situation and that dazzle, when somebody really special walks in, there's a different charge in the room. There's a different, completely, and he could feel him always.
Mm. And I always sat to Aaron's left in casting sessions. I was always right next to him. And after doing it for almost 15 years, I didn't even have to look at him. I could feel it. I could just sense it just because he was sitting next to me, right? I could look at his hands and see what he was doing. I didn't have to look at him. I would know what he was thinking. And it's funny. It's very rare that, particularly towards the end, that I was wrong. If Aaron liked somebody, I knew it. If he wasn't going to like him, I knew it too. It said I didn't always agree with him, but I always knew his taste. And I got to tell you, most of the time he was right.
Most of the time it's interesting, and when we go forward on some of the episodes, I'm going to bring up one or two actors that I know were cast because of their look. Mm. And that was never my instinct, but it mattered a great deal to Aaron. And some of the ones we cast on look, I thought we could, as Jessica once said, Chip talked about the WCDB on the scripts, we could do better. I thought there were other actors there, but the look, it's Aaron, and okay. It's one of his guys. They've done this show and that show, et cetera, et cetera.
It's interesting. Aaron did something on 90210 that he didn't do on any other show. Aaron approved every single piece of casting. So what would happen is,
there's a great deal of trust between Aaron and I, you could see.
Right.
I have never done it before, so I don't blame him. But
so we would go. We would cast in the Valley, and I'm telling you, my office was in the 5700 Wilshire building, and I would schlep over the hill, and that was a drive. And of course, casting was always 5 in the afternoons. It'd take 3 days to get over there. And then I would come back either the.
And it was so glamorous when you got there.
I know the shits. It was like, I mean, I'm sure somebody talked about this, but the studio was in a converted warehouse. You could drive right by. I mean, it was this was not MGM in the 1930s. This was a warehouse. So I would bring pictures and resumes back, and I would sit down and I would talk to Aaron about every single audition. And most of the time he was like, okay, great, fine. And every once in a while he'd fight. He'd go, I don't know about their look and blah, blah, blah. And then, he'd be like, can I see film? So I'd have to call an agent and get a demo reel. All this now you could do on the computer, but in those days, no. It was all sitting with pictures and resumes in front and going through these things. And, even at the end, every single episode, he had to look at, and he had to approve.
Mm.
So
Aaron always
go ahead, Jeff.
Go on, Jess.
Aaron always talked about actors' eyes, and he would talk about the windows.
The windows to the soul.
And they were the windows to the soul. And I learned from him that he wouldn't allow an actor who had small eyes. He looked for big eyes, open eyes. He preferred light color eyes to dark eyes. But I got to see what he meant, because a lot of the performances were going to be in that face,
Yeah.
I will say that it has nothing to do with 90210, but I think that people will appreciate this. Auditioning can be very terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you're auditioning for somebody who's a living legend, like an Aaron Spelling, for a young actor, could be deeply intimidating. But I always said the toughest room I was ever in was when, I mentioned this earlier, we did Lucille Ball's last series. And sitting on the couch was Lucille Ball and Aaron Spelling, and X had to come in and read for the two of them. And I'm telling you, actors were literally experienced actors, 20 years in the business, shaking like leaves.
Mm.
Wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I was in the room and I was shaking.
All right, let me ask you about this. Let me ask you about this guy.
I saw in the feed.
Yeah, so, we'll get to her for sure. But let me ask you about this guy. I don't think we can have a 90210 show without talking about Nat. I think he was a critical member of the cast. Do you remember casting Nat? Joey Tata?
Joey Tata was for many years my best friend. And Joey was my idea. I read the character, and Duke Vincent, who was Aaron's partner, also knew Joey really well. And between Duke and I, we kind of pushed that hard to make that happen. Joey's pretty extraordinary. Joey had done probably 300 hours of television. I mean, the guy had been on literally every single episodic TV show. If you're a Batman fan,
yeah, I've saw some of that.
He's in like 4 episodes, like Goon #1 on a T-shirt. It's yeah. I mean, Joey never stopped working. And it's interesting. He kind of played that father figure in the show.
Yes.
He had that relationship with the kids as well. And
definitely.
He was instrumental later as he was working more and more on the show. He was somebody who actually helped keep Shannon in line.
Mm.
Kind of interestingly.
That is interesting. Yeah. Lily,
I knew about the Duke and you, but do you remember who we read against, who the other person was?
Do you remember? I sure the hell don't.
Yeah, he would, and because he walked in assuming it was his part. It was Frank Gorshin.
God, I don't remember that.
Well, it wasn't memorable. And I think Tony was. I think Joey was very surprised. Was very happy. Because Gorshin went into the whole thing like it's his. And
ironically, they knew each other well, of course, because they both were on Batman. He actually worked with Frank. There's a famous story actually with Joey. No.
Oh, and Joey or Frank?
Well, it's the two of them.
Gorshin or
it's the two of them. When they were
sorry.
They stole the Batmobile.
Oh.
Doing a scene on the Fox lot. They were supposed to pull around the building and cut, and they didn't. They just kept driving. Joey was driving, and they went right out the front gate. Joey waved at the guard. The guard waved back. Thing got on the Pico Boulevard, made a left turn, and died in the middle of Pico.
God, that's brilliant.
I love Joey.
Yeah, Lily, do you have something for Tony? You've been silent for a little bit there. Yeah, go ahead, and then we'll.
No, we're having some really strong thunderstorms right now, so my internet keeps freezing up. That's why
Lily is in Connecticut for all of us. Just a geography note there.
It sounds like it should be here, where thunderstorms are every 5 minutes now.
Yeah. Do you got one for Tony?
Yeah, we have several fan questions. Actually, what we did this week was we asked our viewers in the social media groups who were some of their favorite guest stars. So as I read their question, I'm going to be sharing who their favorites are with you guys.
Cool.
So one of the first ones is from Daniela Lopane. She's one of our viewers from Italy. Her favorite guest star during the high school years was Christina Elise, who played Emily Valentine. She feels she had a major role, and she also liked the girl that played Tiffany, the one that was stealing with Brenda, the klepto. I don't think we have a photo.
Yeah. Don't have a
But
photo.
Daniela's question is who was also in the running for Brenda's role?
Good question.
God.
Was Melissa Coolidge we heard?
That could be.
There was also a rumor that Melissa Coolidge,
Yeah.
the girl who later came back and played Joey, or the mom, the teenage mom.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, she was.
Was she in the running for Brenda at one point and turned down the part?
That is true.
Okay.
Oh, Kristen DeTello, is that her name?
Yes, that's exactly.
Awesome.
Thank you. It was her and Chris, Shannon and Kristen we took to the network, and that's it. It was her brother Brian, who was the guy we took to the network opposite Jason. Because if the two of them had got it, they would have been real brother and sister in real life.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, very interesting.
I'm old, but not that old.
Well, that's a good person to bring up, though. Christina Elise gets cast as Emily Valentine. Do you recall?
Incredible actress, and Aaron loved her, and rightfully so.
I love her.
Performance was amazing. She was really
loved
good.
Yeah.
You wrote the script she was cast in, Jessica.
Yes, I did.
What was she like for you, Jessica, working with Christine?
I loved working with her, and I got to know her in real life, and I really loved her. I loved her character so much, and I loved writing her character, and I loved the reveal when she took off her motorcycle helmet. She did a great job.
She and Luke got really close. They were really close.
And she and Brandon.
Yeah, eventually.
They got closer.
Yeah. Exactly.
Chuck, do you have a couple? You said you have a couple good ones that you wanted to bring up.
Oh, you mean the people who got cast?
You were. I know you mentioned.
Well, I want to talk to you about Jennifer Grant.
Oh,
How did Celeste? She played Celeste London.
Celeste.
So
Yeah.
this had to be the telephone call from Diane Cannon, the mother to Aaron, saying, "Meet my daughter." Is that because she was terrific? We liked her. Then she wasn't doing the show, and she really didn't become an actress. So we were the test out to see if she liked it.
Yeah, I got the call. I got the call from Renee Kamer. Renee was Aaron's executive assistant. Can you meet this actress? And the minute I heard the name, I knew who it was and why. And yeah, Diane had called Aaron, and then we, then I got the let's send her over to 90210. Let's do something and blah blah blah. Yeah, I think she really hated it. I don't think it was the role she wanted to be in.
Yeah, interesting.
she didn't hate 90210. She hated acting.
Acting himself, yes, and probably
She was a
I see what you
lovely,
mean. Thank you for the
girl.
clarity on that.
She really was. Everybody enjoyed her. She definitely was Cary Grant's daughter.
Yeah,
very, very wonderful person.
How about this dude, Deshaun Hardell?
Deshaun.
Great kid.
Love Deshaun.
Great kid.
Do you remember
Fred
casting?
Williams.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Well, we got him. Well, we had a very good. Tony introduced. I had a choice of two casting directors. One was a woman team. They were really entrenched in Hollywood, and the other one was kind of felt a little more indie to me, although she had done a sitcom. So I went with Diane Young, and so she was pretty good at finding college actors, who was, especially over at UCLA, who was happening at UCLA, and Krez was happening in his year and walked in. And, the one thing that you could always say about some of those, the UCLA actors is that that at least in one sense, they're classically trained. They were trained to be an actor. And if they don't get, the difference between acting for the stage and acting for the little screen.
Yeah.
And, I remember once there was a Broadway show that was here at the old Sheperd, I think like City of Angels.
Yep.
And the lead of City of Angels was so fabulous. I called Paul, and I forget what role we were doing, Jess. But I said, "Come on in and do it." And she's there reading, and she's like all over the map. No, you gotta be smaller,
Playing to the balcony when there isn't one. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I always thought this was a great casting too for Steve's dad, Rush. Here,
Yeah.
I know we haven't ever talked about him on this show, but do you remember casting some of the parents, and particularly Steve's dad? I always thought that it was his dad.
No, I want to know, did Tony remember the name of the actor?
No, because I don't know it. Yeah.
Jessica? I know you do.
That's my old person brain, but he's somebody who was.
Oh, he's Jed Allen. He's Jed Allen.
Jed Allen. He had done a ton of work, and he'd been on some soap. He was, but they looked so much alike, and he was so perfectly cast for that role. It was great. And I'm sure Aaron knew him.
Well, Jeb was also a director. So.
Well, he looks like somebody who'd have a cocktail with Duke, too. Truthfully. Or two.
But I think he passed away around the same time that Luke did. Yeah,
sadly.
Yeah, not long ago.
He also was in a very interesting episode that we did, and it really was. I'd love Tony to remind us about it, because I know you do remember this one. Is that there was an athlete that wanted to come on wanted to dabble and see if he wanted to be an actor. So I get the call from Tony, and
Chuck and I, who've been friends for a long time because of the show, one of the things that Chuck and I share is a dire love of baseball. We love baseball, and I was very blessed to call as one of my closest friends for many years, Barry Bonds.
Yeah,
and I had met him through his baseball agent, and Barry had a desire at one time to pursue an acting career on the backside of baseball, and so Aaron, with Chuck's blessing, wrote a role for Barry in the show, and it was great. It was really fun. It was really good. He's a great guy.
Well, the thing I remember too about it was that two things. One is that wanting the show and then to see him the year afterwards. But when we were doing the show, he had 2 days of work. One day he was in a father-son foursome, so he was out on the golf course with Ian and Jed Allen and I think his father. It wasn't Bobby Bonds. Wasn't his real father. It was an actor.
Right.
But the four of them were together, and now it's the next day. And whatever scenes he was doing, it was on the set. It was on our stages in Van Nuys. And I'm walking down, and he comes to me. He's holding the script. So says, "Man, what is this? I've been sitting around here for hours." And I just said, "Barry, you wanted to be an actor, just is it, And then a year later, on a terrible week for all baseball fans, the week that actually a strike happened that ruined the season, a few days before, I get the call. Tony says, "Come down to the office," and it's Barry Bonds, you and I, and the Schmagegi who was with Heisinger, and they owned the team. They owned the team in Miami.
Steve, whatever his name.
Yeah, that guy. And he walks in and he starts talking and explaining to Barry Bonds what the owner's position has to be and where the players are wrong. And he's going on and on. That's not what we were talking about. He came into, I finally turned to him and I said, "You a baseball fan before you got the gig?" And he finally said, "No, I really wasn't." And, and then I think I said something like, "Oh, I couldn't tell that."
Barry told this amazing story about when he was doing that feature film where the little kid pitched in the major leagues. That little that was a feature, and Barry was in it. He was still playing for the Pirates at the time, and in the script it said that he had to foul off the pitch. And there's like a major league pitcher who's actually throwing right off camera, and Barry turns to the director and says, "You want me to foul the pitch off?" The director goes, "Yeah." Barry goes, "Which way do you want it?" That's how good of a hitter he was. He actually could foul it off. And you want it to go down, you want it to go up, you want to go left, where do you want it? And he did it
crazy.
Exactly where he wanted it.
Mhm.
All right. What about this person? You know, we have an obsession with her here on the podcast, Kathleen Robertson. We've been trying to get her on the show. I'm going to comment on that in a second. But do you remember casting Kathleen?
Yeah, what I remember most about Kathleen was making her deal. That was tough. That was hard.
Well, that was after the fact. You see,
Yeah.
she came in to read for an episode. The
Yeah.
Chancellor's Daughter. We liked her. She was funny. We wrote one again. We liked it. Then another one. We liked her. And then she was in the finale, Mr. Walsh Goes to Washington, that Jess and I did with Steve. And it was registering on all cylinders. And that's when Tony had to come in and make the deal.
Yeah.
Not a good time.
A
No.
series deal, a different kind.
It was really tough. And she was getting very hot around town. So she was getting very, she had a lot of activity.
Opportunities. Yeah.
Say again?
She had a lot of opportunities.
Yeah,
A lot of
so it was like, yeah. I mean, we weren't alone here. We weren't on an island at that point.
Yeah.
It's there was.
Oh, Tony, she's still hot around town because we want her to come on the Beverly Hills 90210 show podcast. Kathleen, if you're watching, please come on the show. Now, Larry's not with us this week, but I asked him to record something if he was able to get a hold of her. So this,
Peter, I wish I had better news. I have not heard from Kathleen. I thought we had a good I thought we had a good relationship. I'm not going to take it personally, but I have not heard from her yet. I just only hope soon.
so Kathleen, ball's in your court now. That's it. You know.
Chuck, I'll talk to you offline about this. Let me reach out to her team. I can't say that I can make it happen, but I'll make a call.
You will make this man in yellow so happy.
Yes, my teenage crush. Yes. Justin, did you have a note on this?
Right now, but I mean, all we can do is ask.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll use
all
some of
love
his Disney
Kathleen.
magic.
Yeah. Jessica,
It'll probably cost me a VIP tour at Disneyland, but what the heck?
Jessica, go ahead. What did you say? You had something.
I wanted to say that as we're talking about casting, I have to share with Chuck my greatest casting opportunity. Chuck Rosen cast his daughter, Lindsay, who is now a very, very famous television writer, as girl number one in some scene where we needed a little girl.
Right.
And I got to cast my daughter as girl number two. And they appeared together, these two little girls who were 5 years old and 4 years old, or 4 years old and 3 years old. And it is a wonderful memory for us because we have footage of our children and they got to know each other then. And it's a lovely memory. I also got to cast my own father as a very old man in the episode with Milton Berle, where they was one of the residents in the nursing home.
Right.
Lily, you had a question about the Milton Berle episode, didn't you? I think you showed me that. Maybe. Did I make that up? Go ahead. What you got? Go ahead. You can go for whatever you have. Don't worry about Milton Berle.
Yeah, I kind of had them in order by
Yeah.
seasons.
No worries. I'm sorry. I went off script.
So Zara Brown, she says 90210 had so many great guest stars. A few of her favorites from the high school years was also Christina Lease, James Pickens Jr., who portrayed Henry Thomas.
Oh, yeah.
She liked Dana Barron, who played Nikki Witt. During the college years, she loved Cress Williams and Dina Mayer, who played Lucinda Nicholson. But she wants to know, how did Ann Gillespie get the role of Jackie Taylor? Because in the pilot, it was Pamela Galloway.
Oh, great question.
Okay, well, there were things I really liked about the pilot, and there were a lot of things I didn't pay any attention to, and that was one of them. I didn't even know that Kelly had a mom in the pilot.
Interesting.
And we had a couple of Luke fathers before Luke. We had to cast one who really could act. I wasn't going to spend, every dollar counted. So until we really needed the actor to be front and center and make some more effort in casting to find the right person, didn't care that much about it. I know, and I told Ann Gillespie why I cast her, was so happy about it. On the very last episode of 90210 that was filmed in season 10, The Wedding, my kids wanted, you probably don't know this, Jess, my kids wanted to go. So Karen and I and all three of our kids went to the Hilton, and the wedding was the last day. And so Luke was there. You know, he's still with the cat, Jenny, or, you know, all the cast members who were there. And Anne was one of the actors who was there as well. And Anne Gillespie did a series. She didn't have that long of a resume at that point, but she had done a series called Cop Rock that was done by Stephen Bochco. And as I said to Tony, you know, in passing, I said, you know, it was hard in the beginning to get really some actors that were in demand actors to come that you'd see on the other shows to come in and read for us. And then here was this really nice looking woman. It just exactly had a nice spelling look. It actually, I think, even had a spelling credit, but it was Cop Rock. And I told her that. I said, you know, you did Cop Rock, and she laughed because the reason she got to do Cop Rock is that her ex-brother-in-law or a cousin was Greg Hoblet, who was one of the directors and really close to Bochco, and it was a nepotism thing, which Jessica just talked about nepotism, and I've said that Aaron and I and Jessica, we believed in nepotism. It was a good thing, and so I admire Greg Hoblet for doing that, but that is why, oh, she's good enough for Hoblet, yeah. Okay, Aaron, she's good for here. You know, I gave her a leg up because of that.
Yeah. I'm not even sure we ever called on Pamela Galloway. It's possible she wasn't available, you know, but
I'm sure. Oh, maybe you did. I wouldn't know.
I don't recall, you know.
Right.
Let's talk about this person now. We talked about last week Shannon leaving the show. That was a big thing that we talked about. So Shannon leaves, and I guess at some point you're thinking about replacing that person, not, you know, with Brenda, but you do bring in Tiffany Amber Thiessen, and I know that she's been asked about here in the gallery. Talk about that process. I know that it's been mentioned that there were a few names in the mix for that.
There were. Aaron loved Tiffany Thiessen, loved her. She had done something else for us. Who remembers what it was? You know, she guessed it on something else or come in for something, and Aaron really loved her. I remember that he was excited that we got her. I remember that. He really liked her, and the network really liked her. A lot of people. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people who are watching remember that Tiffany was pretty well established from Saved by the Bell.
Yeah.
And you know, even as successful as we were at that time, some people thought that was a get to get her. You know. Mm-hmm. By the way, like I said, a lot of it comes full circle, right? It all comes back around. Tiffany comes to parks all the time. She's now a celebrity chef.
Yeah.
She takes part in our food and wine festivals, both at Disneyland and at Walt Disney World. So we've been working with her again. So, you know, everything old is new again. So,
but I think someone said Alyssa Milano was up for that role.
She was.
And what was that process like for you, Tony?
Alyssa's probably really pissed off at us because I think, if memory serves, she kind of thought she was going to get it. And at the same time, Alyssa had been up for a pretty good role in a movie that we had done that a now convicted criminal, Lori Loughlin, ended up doing. That was unkind. Sorry, I went for the joke. I apologize.
I get it. Yeah.
We made a movie based on a Sidney Sheldon novel called Stranger in the Mirror that Lori starred in, and a lot of people thought Alyssa was going to get that job. In fact, she was up for it. So it kind of happened twice to her. So I'm not sure that Alyssa was a big fan of us in those days. However,
she did Charmed, right?
Yes. That was kind of the payback. And again, another big Disney Parks fan, so she comes all the time. So there you go.
One more thing about Valerie, and Zara brought this up, and I saw a couple people bring this up. Brian didn't know Tiffany was going to be casted. They were dating. He mentioned this when he was on our show. Do you recall that Brian did not know, or?
Yes, I do remember that vividly. You know, I remember that. Yeah, it's like, you know, I was probably talking to Tiffany's agent. We were making the deal, And she and Brian are dating. And I said, great. Not sure how relevant it is to the case at bar. But it was like, yeah, great.
It was one of the recurring themes of season 5 off camera, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right.
It was very challenging.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a lot of conversations.
Yeah, there were, this cast was, they were very close. There was a lot of talking going on.
Hey, Lily, I know you're going to ask about this, so I'm gonna plug it up for you. Stuart, but he's somebody else.
Yes.
Well, go ahead. Yeah.
Yes. So actually, Omer Daniel, he wants to know about the casting process for the second role that several of the actors had. For example, David Gale appeared as a bellhop in the Palm Springs episode in season 1, and then he came back in season 4 as Stuart Carson. Gordon Curry, who played Cousin Bobby, the Walsh cousin, later on came back as Danny Five, the drug dealer. What was the casting process like for the second role? Were they asked to come back because everyone loved them, or did they come back and audition?
Came back and auditioned. I remember
Came back and audition.
Yeah, they always came back and auditioned. I remember on one of them, I don't remember which one it was, but I got it. Aaron didn't recognize the actor in the picture, right? But when he saw the rough cut, he went, I know that actor. Wasn't he in the show before? My phone rang. Wasn't he in the show before? I'm like, oh, crap. So, yeah, Aaron, he was a bellhop in season 1 or whatever the role, I don't ever want to see that again, Cliff.
So my friend Lou DiMaggio played a photographer in one of the episodes. He photographed them at prom, and we brought him back to photograph them again because we figured, well, he's a photographer. He could have gotten the gig twice.
Yeah.
But we also brought him back to be a Christmas tree salesman in one of the Christmas episodes. And in our minds, if Aaron had ever really gotten mad about it, we would have just said, well, the poor photographer wasn't getting a lot of work, so to make extra money, he worked as a Christmas tree salesman. That was his backstory in our minds.
Just in case. Yeah.
Again, just as an aside, the series that is famous for that is Law and Order.
Yeah, because there's only so many actors in New York, and they've gone through every one.
Only so many.
And in fact, a couple of years ago on the Tony Awards, they did a whole montage of it, and they picked 5 or 6 actors out of the audience who were there, like nominated for Tonys. So-and-so has done like this, and they're showing them like 6 times on different episodes of Law and Order. So
Yes, exactly.
That's very cute.
How about Dean Cain? Is that on your list, Lily? Is Dean Cain on your list?
It is.
Yeah. I saw in the comments. Yeah, I also really love Dean Cain as Rick.
Yeah.
As Reek.
Yeah.
Well, that's the only one.
Brenda calls him Reek with her fake French
Monsieur
accent.
Reek.
Monsieur Reek. Yes,
Yeah.
but
Emmanuel.
yes, and actually someone got paid to help her do that French accent. A friend of mine was a drama coach, came in and did it. That's what they came up with.
Yeah.
Who knew? But the the thing about Mr. Reek, and I was going to bring it up, it is the only time, because Karen wrote all those French going to France, shows. So there we were a little, and the truth is, Paul would harass me about this, but he wasn't right. I focused a little bit more. If Karen wrote the script, I had to make it, I had to work a little harder to please her and make sure everything was, all the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed. And one of the people came in to read for the part was Mark Kiley, who ended up, and we loved Mark Kiley, and his reading was great.
Yeah.
But Mr. Spelling wanted a look, and it was the only time, Tony, in my memory of it, sure there were others, when that happened. Once in a while, I remember him saying to you or me, maybe once or twice out of that, especially in the earlier years when he was more involved, go back to the well. Find somebody else. Yeah. But it was the only one that we said this one. He said, no, this one.
Dean.
Fine. And then we bought Mark back to play the teacher. So
exactly.
Yeah, Gil Myers, right? Yeah, we talked about him at the time.
If an actor's career does this, right? We caught Dean as he was going up.
Well, he was just starting out, yeah.
Yeah, and obviously has gone, had gone on to great, great success. And you can look at any number of television shows from our era, before or after. I'll give you an example. I earlier in the pandemic, I watched a bunch of episodes of The West Wing. Go watch the first few seasons of The West Wing. I mean, half of primetime TV is in guest starring roles in that show, right? It's like they start somewhere, right? And they show up in 3-line roles, and you're like, hey, there's, So
Yeah.
The one that we had as starting out for a guy was in our 3rd season when we in the Beach Club second time around. We wanted to have Andrea have a boyfriend, kind of, so that Brandon getting askance, and it was Peter Krause. We did 4 episodes with Peter Krause. We went on to do everything from 6 Feet Under and that, and he was so good. He was great. You remember him, Jessica? He was so. I remember him in the audition and the thing. He's just like, well, this guy is just so solid. And
the one that killed me was I really, really wanted Kerry Russell to play the part of Tony Marchette, and I've talked about this before here. Aaron wouldn't let me, and he said he pretended it was because she had curly hair, and he didn't like that, and he wound up hiring.
They have the same hair.
Kay, who had the same hair, and it turned out it was because Aaron was saving Kerry Russell for Malibu 2000.
Right. By the way,
you mean that Aaron? Wait a second. I'm confused. You mean that Aaron had an agenda?
By the way, are we going to talk about the Oscar nominee who was on our show?
That was post Jessica and me. You weren't there with Hilary Swank, were you?
No.
So we were gone.
Yeah.
Season 8.
Lily, what else do you have? I was going to ask what.
So I have about 4 more, but I have one very important one. I don't know how much time we have left.
A little bit. Go ahead.
Okay. So, Beth Wiederspiel wants to know, well, her favorites were also Emily Valentine, Jennifer Grant also, but she would like to know which actors started off as guest stars but became regulars, and were there any who came in and really didn't vibe or get along with the cast and were either cut or recast?
No, that's probably, go ahead. That's a lot. Good question, though.
God. Well, obviously, Tori was a guest star and became a series regular.
Mm-hmm.
Technically, Luke was.
Kathleen.
Technically, Joey Tata was.
Joey certainly was. Yeah.
I didn't do that, right. And Mark Damon? Well, no. Mark Damon we cast knowing he was going to come back and do that. So that wasn't applicable.
I don't recall any guest star that came in and was such a disruptive influence off camera that they.
No, I don't either. Everybody, that wasn't our show. I did fire a director in prep because he was so obnoxious.
Really?
That's interesting.
It was me.
It's so obnoxious. Yeah, Mr. Pilney. He got a partial screen credit on it because he was a writer-director, and it just didn't work out. But never happened with an actor.
No,
he had a good bunch.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, think about this: how often are you a guest in somebody's home and behave completely awfully and obnoxious?
Right. Well,
in principle. I
do know there was at least twice, both the guy who played the summer school teacher in season 2, who was on Elvis, mm-hmm. and the oddly enough, the nurse, when Dylan was going through his dreams of Dylan McKay, I saw that as someone he's going through all this spiritual stuff and going on what's going on, that was somebody we could have written the table with, and starting right there in a personal relationship, a different element. And the actress just wasn't that interested in being there. You could just tell by the performance. So we stopped that. So that happened that time. So that's not jiving personality-wise, but creatively it wasn't happening.
Interesting. It's one of those things where again, to use a baseball analogy, it's like you come in to a very tight clubhouse mid-season because you've been traded there, and you may know the people, but you don't know them well, and you're going to keep your distance.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So kind of goes like that.
That was social distancing before it was a thing, right?
Yeah.
Lilly, I'm going to let you go for one or two more, and then we're going to kind of wrap up here. So what else you got?
Whatever I can't get in, maybe Chuck, I'll just email you so I can get these girls an answer. But I have a Lilly question right now.
Sure, go for it.
I was doing some homework and I came across an article from 1991. So I'm going to give you 2 words and I want you to tell us all about it. Casting house.
Casting house?
Ring a bell? Yeah.
What is that?
Apparently there was some kind of scam that they did.
Oh.
They weren't affiliated with the show.
Yeah,
but
Chuck, you remember this?
Not at all. Not at all. Maybe it'll jar my memory.
Diane and I ended up in Ira Reiner's office downtown. He was DA of
he was the DA for a while. Right.
And there was a scam. The people were like selling auditions to 90210. It was a complete scam, this casting house thing. And Aaron heard about it, and he sent me and Diane, and we went down and we did a press conference, as head of casting for Spelling and the casting director for the show. And that it has nothing to do with 90210, and that legitimate casting is done through licensed talent agents and us. It's if you were to Google my name and Ira Reiner,
I did.
You'll find an article.
I did.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, apparently they were putting flyers on high school lockers and charging people $12 to audition, and it was like this big thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Who else you got, Lilly? Do you have any other interesting?
So Julia Band would like to know how Paul Johansson was cast as John Sears.
Good one. Yeah. Let's see. I got a picture there.
He walked in the room. Had a script in it.
Wasn't he Jason's friend?
And there was the thing. If you were, I think we mentioned it, Jess, if you were Canadian and a guy and was a working actor, had about 2 or 3, 5 credits, didn't matter. Jay said, can you find a part 4? And we always did, because they were good guys. I mean, without exception, he wouldn't recommend it. And me, I was, my kids were in a school, elementary school at the time, and a lot of actresses were in that same school. They would come up to me. They were actresses' moms, and they played different Board of Education parts, nurse here and there. Same thing, if it's in the
especially, people had to make their health insurance. So every now and then you'd give an actor a job, a small job, because they needed a credit so that they could get health insurance.
Nice.
It was the once a year that we had to give a job for Army Archer or Selma Archer, right? Yeah.
How about this person? Chuck, we've never talked about her. Lilly mentioned her before. Nikki Witt, right? Is that
in a bear? And she's such a nice person. I haven't seen her in a number of years, but I'd run into her. She was a big 90210 person, and she had the kind of heart. She wanted us to basically do one because we already, why don't we have the cast to do an episode in Africa?
I was just going to say she was the one. She wanted to do an episode in Sambulia, and I said, "You mean Somalia?" And she said, "Yes, Somalia."
So I think she was in a vacation movie. I think,
yeah,
right?
National Lampoon. Yeah, she was a kid.
So we just did the season premiere of The Goldbergs, the TV series on ABC.
Yeah,
was done at Disneyland this year. And so we brought the entire. I was out there, and they're a great bunch of guys. And what they did was they did a parody of Vacation. They got to Disneyland and it was closed. The gag was they got there too early and they were of course let in. But Dana Barron, along with her older brother on the show in the movie, played security guards. Dana,
that's great.
Yeah, it was great. It was a great gag, and Christy Brinkley was in the episode too. It was really fun.
Oh, very
cool. But Dana's had some health issues.
Oh no!
But
he had kidney problems, right?
Yeah. But has bounced back.
Great.
I see a comment on the right side. Somebody said that PJ, Jason, and Brad Pitt were roomies before any of them made it. I do remember going through a file around the 90210 time with a bunch of pictures and resumes in my office. And Brad Pitt's picture and resume was in that file. I remember.
Wow. Yeah. And you just skipped it.
No, I didn't skip it. He probably came in for something, but it's not always the right marriage of actor and role. So
For sure. That makes sense.
may not have been right.
Lily, got any more?
I do. So I found the Milton Berle comment. It wasn't a question, but Val Marin says that Milton Berle was one of her favorite guest stars. Also Dana Barron and Rebecca Gayheart. But Val wants to know, were there any actors that you really wanted for a part, but they just refused to do it? And also, were there any actors that you had difficulty casting because of the type of characters they were portraying? For example, Brandon's girlfriend on the beach, Brooke, she was kind of
Racist.
a racist.
It's a great question.
So,
Who's that? Who asked that?
Oh, the racist.
Val
yeah.
Marin.
So,
Good question.
Yeah.
Most actors won't hesitate to take a role like that because, particularly in episodic television, because it gives them an opportunity to dig their teeth into it.
Yeah.
Little chops. So, I think most of the people in an audience are intelligent enough to know that the role they play is not a reflection of them as people.
Sure.
So, if somebody's playing a racist, it certainly doesn't mean that they're racist. They're playing the play. That's what they do.
Right.
So I don't, I know of some examples that are outside of Beverly Hills 90210 where actors have refused to play roles. The most famous one is there's a brilliant British actor by the name of Derek Jacobi, probably arguably the greatest living classical actor of our time. Derek Jacobi was offered the role of Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs before Tony Hopkins, and he said it was too reprehensible, he couldn't play it. And look what happened.
in 90210 time, I made 3 overtures to actors to see if they wanted to come on. I wanted Lorenz Tate, who really was doing great at the time, and he knew Brian, and I thought he would be really good, not just for Squash It, but to be a friend, and just thinking about him. I reached out to on a stunt cast. I reached out to Martin Lawrence, and Martin Lawrence actually called me back, and he just said, I can't do it. I'm not allowed to do it. It'd be so much fun. So that was nice. And then the actress was the star of the remake of Father of the Bride. I remember I took my daughter to Father of the Carla Gugino.
Gugino.
Carla Gugino?
Yeah.
I think that's her name. She was
on Son-in-Law with Pauly Shore.
Well, she was the student at Northwestern when she did it. And I said, you want to forgo your senior year and come out and be with us? And she didn't. She wanted to have her senior year.
Wow.
But she was. But she interested me. I remember seeing that with Lindsay. I want to just say one thing to Tony and appreciate it because you're a Disney man. When we did all those episodes in Paris, we shot at Universal. And one of the lines in the script was saying that we needed, like Brenda was worried about Donna because Donna didn't go to Paris Disney. She didn't go on that field trip. And Universal would not let us film it until we changed the line.
There you go.
And we got the call. Do you remember that, Jessica? I got called on the thing, and I get on the phone and I say, we're here because of Mr. Spelling and Mr. Wasserman. Would you like me to get Mr. Spelling to call Mr. Wasserman and tell her what's your name again? Click. But we did change the line.
But yeah, these days they'll just gladly take the check. They don't care. I can tell you with 100% of surety the Milton Berle thing is Aaron called Milton. They knew each other. So.
Well,
actually, no. No, that's not what happened. Steve and I met Milton at a party, and we asked him if he would do it. And we had an experience with Milton that was different from every other guest cast experience. Milton demanded to participate in the writing of the episode. And he came into the office every single day as we were writing it to tell us how we should write it, and he read every page and told us how we should rewrite it. And it was really quite something.
Because Ian came up with the idea originally.
It was Ian's idea.
Stephen Jess.
It was Ian's idea we didn't know what Milton would play, but at the same time, Ian had come to us and pitched an idea for an episode about an old guy with Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. So we put it all together. We told Milton we had this role for him. Would he do it? And he said yes. And then after having done it, he loved it so and was so proud of it that he lobbied really, really hard with his friends to get himself an Emmy nomination. And he got the nomination. It was our only Emmy nomination.
Our only one.
And he lobbied. And Jane Meadows helped him. All these people helped him. Yeah. And it was fun.
And Aaron made sure that I was going to be on the set. He said, Milton walks on the set, you are there. And the only time I spent more time on that episode anyway, I even went to that old folks' house that we did, the old
which is now the Archer School.
Yeah, right.
Todd H., who made those cool little cars that we saw before with the logo on it, he wants to know about Jack Canner, Jason's friend.
That's who I'm thinking of when I think of Jason's friends. I think of David Sherrill. He was a nice guy.
Very nice.
And we brought him back for 2. He's only supposed to do 1. We brought him back for 2.
And we brought him back for a second one, didn't we?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah. Lily, one more, and then we're going to wrap this up.
I'm going to combine it just to kind of wrap up what we have here. So Alicia Bogner and Brenda Burris, they want to know who was the hardest character to cast, regular or guest, and any regrets with any of the casting.
Good questions. Glad you asked them.
Well, Luke was the hardest. Dylan was the hardest.
Yeah, I was going to say Luke was. Well,
did you have any, Jessica, that was really, really hard, even after I left?
I would say
not that I remember. No.
Yeah.
The hardest. We knew it was going to be.
And yes, there are ones that we regret, but it's not in any really big part. Maybe the actor. I mean, he became a preacher, so I can say that the actor who played the drama teacher, he knew he wasn't going to remain an actor as he was doing it. He was already ready to go. I think down the spiritual path, and so I don't think nothing was going on the screen. And so I would like to take that back because Beverly Hills kids went to summer school. It was a big thing if you were in Beverly Hills High School, and so it was part of it. So that's just my feeling.
Yeah, I would also say, in addition to Luke, I think you've got to put Brandon / Jason there because
I wasn't there, so I don't know.
Yeah, so Aaron always used to point to any show he ever did. He always would point to a role and he'd go, "This is the quarterback." And he obviously identified, Brandon as the quarterback of the show, and he never hesitated to say, "If we don't get the right guy for this role, we're dead." And he was right. None of us would be sitting here right now if it weren't for Jason or Luke.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, this was a great, Tony, I think we could do a lot more with you. So come back. And we loved having you here. I said I was going to
Disney ever opens again,
I was going to give away a shirt. I was going to give away a shirt, so I'm going to give it to Dana Canberg. She popped in. So Dana, hit me up and I'll hit you up and we'll figure it out. Thank you for the 5-star review. Now, next week, we're splitting again, right? Chuck and Karen are going to come on for an episode called The Collaborators. And we're doing 2 episodes. Chuck, what are we doing? Tell us the 2 that we're going to do.
We're doing the first two we collaborated with. One is called Fame Is Where You Find It. That was where Brenda was Laverne. And the next one is everybody's talking about it, which was The Ordeal About Condoms.
So that will be that's Wednesday. And then Friday, Larry's back. And we're doing the season 6 ender. You say it's your birthday, where the Queen Mary and that big birthday party. And so that's next week.
You should take Jess because it's Shabbat. You won't be on it, but you will probably have thoughts about it.
Yes, ma'am.
Shabbat's late. I don't have thoughts about it. There are many episodes I would like to talk about, but I don't have any memory, zero memory. So I'd rather talk about one that's stuck.
Yeah.
You
All
got to
right.
watch them.
Yeah, we'll send you some episodes for sure. Okay, and don't forget, guys, Beverly Hills 90210 showshop.com for all the shirts. We have a new one. Real quick, let me see if I can plug this. I don't know if I plugged this one yet. The David Silver one. Did I mention this one? Keep it together.
Nice.
Winter, spring, summer, fall. Keep it together, David Silver. All right, guys, this was great. Tony, please come back, and I hope everything works out in Disney and people get back to the parks and all that. I'm all about gratitude these days, Tony, so let me say, so many fans are obviously commenting and saying beautiful things about this show, but you have such a big, big hand in all of our memories. So thank you so much for the work that you put in, the hours and dedication in finding these people, because they're so important to all of us. And I'm sure even the writers here, you always probably
absolutely
gave them a hand.
We had a lot of fun.
We had a lot of fun. It was really great.
All right. So we will see you guys next week. And thanks for listening. All right, guys. And watching.
Thank you. Bye, Chas. Good to see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
Bye,
everybody.
Take care, everybody.
Later.